What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about Moon Knight. So the latest Marvel Studios Disney Plus series has just wrapped up after its 6th episode, and the directorial duties went to people like Mohamed Diab, Justin Benson, and Aaron Moorhead, with some of the writers being Danielle Iman, Jeremy Slater, and Peter Cameron, as well as many others. Of course, you have a fantastic cast in the show with people like Oscar Isaac, Ethan Hawke, May Calamawy, as well as F. Murray Abraham. And yeah, I could not wait to see this show when they originally announced it. To know that they were finally going to bring a character like Moon Knight to screen was absolutely exciting. I am somebody who is familiar with the comics of Moon Knight, and I've seen him appear in little cartoons here or there, or things like video games, but he's never really gotten the full on-screen representation that I was always hoping for his character to get. So when I saw that they announced this and that Oscar Isaac was going to play the leading role, I was incredibly excited to see what they would end up doing, because one of my favorite things going into a comic book movie today, especially something like Marvel Studios, is to see how they adapt stories that people are familiar with, characters that people are familiar with, but also, take creative liberties to kind of do something different and make this iteration of the story and the character its own. And I gotta say, right out of the gate, I love this show. I had a lot of fun with it week to week. This is a show that I think may turn off some because of its mysterious kind of approach to telling its story. It is a narrative completely dipped into mystery and trying to subvert your expectations and kind of keep you confused. Thankfully, because I'm familiar with Moon Knight, I didn't really have to worry too much about that. I was able to kind of look past any time that they were trying to, really confuse me. But I did speak to a lot of people week to week who were really confused with the show and felt like they weren't able to fully follow it, which is a damn shame. But I know that there was others who watched this show who just loved the way that they were, steeping this narrative in mystery and kind of making that, part of the intrigue of where things were going. And even for myself, even though I was familiar with a lot of the elements at play here, I think that the way that they played around with those things and the way that they introduced the story, even myself, kept me on my toes and kept me engaged in everything from beginning to end, because I never really knew when they were going to implement certain elements that I was actually looking forward to. Moon Knight is a character that often is kind of compared to Batman for the Marvel universe. Obviously, they live in completely different universes, and of course, I think the more comparison that people tend to make is an Iron Man, Batman kind of thing, of course, because you have the two rich guys that have the money and the time and all that stuff to make their own gadgets and, kind of create their own superhero, and they both don't have superpowers, whereas Moon Knight does have powers. But Batman and Moon Knight are very similar in the sense that they're like, heroes of the night. They tend to like lurking on gargoyles and things like that, and they have a very similar vibe in the comics when it comes to what they do at night, going out and saving people. They both have the cape, and there's that big badass shape that you tend to see in their comic book art of them jumping in the air with the cape. So yeah, they were very similar characters, and when I heard that Moon Knight was coming in, I was definitely wanted to see if they were going to play on that a little bit, and I don't think that this show really shows that all too much. There's a couple of moments, but I think that this definitely is honing in on making this character have its own identity, as it should, but I am curious if we'll start to feel a little bit more of that Batman kind of vibe that we get from Moon Knight in the comics in some of the future movies and TV shows to feature this character. Now, I'm not going to get into deep spoilers and break down everything, but I am going to talk about the basic premise. So if you know nothing about this show and you don't want to hear absolutely anything, then maybe leave. But if you're somebody who's just like, hey, listen, I want to be sold on this show, should I check it out? I genuinely think that this is a great show and that you should hop in. But the basic premise of the show is we open up and we're focusing on the character of Stephen Grant, played by Oscar Isaac, who's just your everyday dude who, doesn't really have all the luck in the world. He's going to work at a gift shop in a museum. He's passionate about history, specifically Egyptian culture and Egyptian history, but he's just a kind of a guy stuck in a dead-end job who's got a goldfish and doesn't really have a whole lot going on. That's when things start to get a little bit weird, as he has these moments where he'll black out and then wake up and find himself completely somewhere different, around things that he's not familiar with, or sometimes around people who have been beaten up or killed. Over the course of the show, Steven starts to discover that there's another personality inside him, a man named Mark, who has been tied to him in a way because of an Egyptian god named Khonshu. I'm not going to say too much more. If you've seen the show, you already know what happens, so obviously you don't need me to give you a full spoiler breakdown of everything that goes down. But this is a show that's completely steeped in mystery, and I know that I've spoken to tons of my coworkers or people who have come in to my job who've asked me about Moon Knight. Maybe we got into the conversation, and a lot of them are really intrigued to check it out. They just haven't had the time to, or they haven't checked it out at all because they weren't sure if they were going to love it, and they've asked me week to week if I enjoyed it, if I didn't enjoy it. And yeah, I'm here to say that this was a fantastic time, and if you have yet to see Moon Knight, I highly recommend doing so. This is a show that has so many layers to its storytelling. Ultimately, this show in a lot of ways in its narrative is about grief, the things that we do to cope with grief and kind of move on, and how a lot of times those things make us stronger, but sometimes they also hold us back. And it's about us kind of having to come to terms with our inner turmoil to kind of, become a more full individual. And yeah, overall, I really enjoyed the message of the show. I really enjoyed the pacing of the show as well. I love that they spent the first 5 of the 6 episodes in this show really honing in on character and narrative. Though I will say that the final episode of the show definitely leans more into that big Marvel Studios action that you expect to see. It does hone in on, wrapping up certain things of the narrative and still focusing on character. But what I really enjoyed was that the first 5 episodes are very, very much about character, and I think that that's going to be something that's really important moving forward as we get to anything else that will feature this character. They've really laid the groundwork down really solidly, especially with the first 5 episodes of the show. I would say episode 4 and 5 are probably my favorite, with the first one being a great introduction to the series. I think the way that they chose to introduce telling this story was really impressive. I think this is a story that could have become very convoluted and very overly confusing, and even at the end could have still been confusing had it been in the hands of the wrong directors or the wrong writers. But overall, I found this to be a really solid introduction to this character for this version in this universe, and I think that they did a fantastic job really, again, honing in on character and really realizing who this character is in this iteration of the character in the story. And moving forward, again, we don't have to do that anymore. I'm sure they'll still do character work with Moon Knight, with Steven, with Mark. But yeah, I'm really curious to see where they take Moon Knight moving forward. The idea of a schizophrenic, in a way, superhero with these Egyptian godlike powers is just so cool. I've always been a fan of his character from the comic books, and to again finally see him in live action is amazing. I really enjoyed the visuals and the action of the show as well. There are times where you can see that the TV budget is a little bit apparent in terms of its CGI, but overall there's also a lot of really great CGI in the show, especially around some of the Egyptian gods. There's a great balance of it feeling realistic and looking kind of surreal at the same time. I really enjoyed that element of the show. The look and the feel and the vibe of the show was fantastic from beginning to end. I definitely want to praise the 2 cinematographers for the show. You have people like Gregory Middleton as well as Andrew Draws Palermo. I'm not sure if I pronounced that one right. Yeah, I really enjoyed the way that the show was shot. I think that was part of what really made the show feel and look so cool. And I think one of the biggest elements I have to praise about this show, without a doubt, is the score. The composer of this show was Hisham Nazi, I believe that's how you pronounce his name. And yeah, every episode I was hooked in, and when that Moon Knight theme kicked in, I was so hyped. Even the music in the credits just had me wrapped up with excitement to see the next episode every time an episode ended, simply because of how strong that score was. And now that we have Moon Knight in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and we have all these other characters kind of being re-added to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, as well as characters that I'm sure we'll get introduced to in the future, and characters that are already in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I can't help but think, are we eventually going to get a Midnight Suns movie? The Midnight Suns are a group of badass, kind of darker characters that have included characters like Ghost Rider, Moon Knight, Daredevil, the Punisher, Doctor Strange, Morbius. There's a lot of characters that have been a part of Midnight Suns that we've had movies of, or that are part of the MCU via like a Netflix TV show. And yeah, overall, I'm excited to see if they're gonna eventually give us a Midnight Suns movie or TV show. As soon as they announced Moon Knight, and I kind of thought to myself about the slate of characters that are now part of the MCU, the first thing I thought of was Midnight Suns. So I hope that we eventually get the Midnight Suns in some sort of live action capacity, because that could be pretty fucking awesome. Clearly I like the show. I just kind of wanted to ramble my thoughts here on camera, and I definitely want to ask you guys, did you like the show? Did you not like the show? Did you find yourself overly confused? I can see this show turning off some because of the way it chooses to tell its narrative, for people who don't like things that kind of approach things in a more confusing interesting way that kind of, approach things in a manner to kind of flip things on its head and kind of keep you guessing, then you may struggle with this show. If you're somebody who likes a show to kind of give you answers episode by episode, then you may not fully enjoy this show. But I was completely lost in the mystery and the intrigue and how they were choosing to tell this story. Of course, I have a little bit more of an insight from having read the comics, but this is an adaptation that's completely separate from that. So in a lot of ways, there was plenty of things that were happening in the show that I had no idea were going to happen or had no idea what direction they were going to take it. But overall, I'm really excited about the show. I kind of am looking forward to rewatching these 6 episodes. And I will say, I wasn't the biggest fan of the post-credit scene. I kind of expected it to an extent. But yeah, I wasn't the biggest fan of the post-credit scene. I feel like they could have given us something a little bit bigger, a little bit better. But overall, man, I had a great time with this show. I think if you're a fan of comic book movies and TV shows, if you're a fan of Marvel and maybe you're on the fence, you're like, oh, will I like this? I do highly recommend it. I think in the future when this character shows up again, you'll be hyped to see him reappear. And honestly, if Oscar Isaac does not get nominated for some sort of award, an Emmy or whatever the case may be, then there's something completely and utterly wrong here, because he's giving us multiple performances in this film. He's playing multiple people, same guy in a way, but not, and he's giving us different accents, and he's just so committed, and it's so believable from beginning to end. I really thoroughly enjoyed his performances in this show, and overall, I thought the cast was just strong. There are so many moments where all the actors in this show have to give these performances that feel almost disconnected from themselves in a way, where they have to kind of act facially differently than their body is acting. And I think that's definitely one of my favorite parts about this show, especially watching Oscar Isaac week to week. I mean, there are so many moments as he's struggling with these multiple personalities within himself where his body is acting in a certain way different than his face and his voice, and he has to continually switch between these 2 iterations of this character. And I found him to just be so compelling. I found it to just be so impressive. And I think that Oscar Isaac is just one of the greatest actors that is working today. And though he does get a lot of praise and has been a part of so many incredible things, I think this is really going to change the game for Oscar Isaac moving forward. So that's going to be my thoughts on Moon Knight. Like I said, not a spoiler breakdown of everything, but I just kind of wanted to talk about some of the people involved, some of the things I'm looking forward to seeing, what I enjoyed about the show. And yeah, what's also really cool that I'll tag on here is week to week while I was watching the show, I just wrapped up like a week and a half ago, but I just played Assassin's Creed Origins for the first time, which is, obviously a huge open world game that takes place in Egypt. And what's really cool about that game is I did full completion. I was going for like everything that I could possibly do, and there are tons of elements of that deal with Egyptian gods and going to tombs and things like that, and seeing some of these gods manifested in in kind of like a real creature that you have to fight in the game. And so to be playing that alongside the weekly releases of this show was really cool, because there were certain tombs and certain things that I did in the actual game that were kind of referenced or shown, or that were actually gone to in certain episodes of this show, which kind of just had me completely steeped in Egyptian lore and mythology for probably the last like month and some change. So a big thanks to you guys for watching. I can't wait to hear what more people have to say about this. It seems like most people I'm talking to have been enjoying this show, but of course I definitely want to present the question to you guys. Have you been a fan of Moon Knight? Have you not been a fan of Moon Knight? Leave any and all those comments down below, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. And I will have my review for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness coming, what is it, Wednesday? Yeah, that review will be up tomorrow, probably around 5 or 6 p.m. If you're watching this way after the fact and both videos are up, then exit this video and just go watch my Doctor Strange video instead. And I'll see you guys in the next one, alright? Bye-bye.